Hi, I'm Mike with Pro Irrigation Training, and in this video we're going to walk through the troubleshooting steps of one of the zones in your irrigation system isn't working. One of the zones of your sprinkler system is not operational, but the rest of them are. So we're going to come at this, as always, from the standpoint of a technician going out on a service call. So the very first thing we always want to do is ask a lot of questions. Ask your client, your homeowner, has any damage recently happened to the property? Has any phone lines or cable TV lines, fiber optic or anything been installed in the ground? Drain lines been replaced, pool work, landscape lighting, any plants replaced on the property, anything like that. Just trying to jog their memory. They may not right off the bat know to tell you that something has happened. Ask them when's the last time they saw that zone running. When did they realize it was a problem? So just ask as many questions as you can think of. Take notes if you need to. So now we're going to go to the timer and turn it on. Right? Obviously, one of the questions that we ask is which of your zones isn't running? Let's say it's zone number 3. Well, which zone is that? Oh, it's the left side yard. So let's go to the timer and turn on number 3. And don't just lean your head out of the garage and go, yep, number 3 is not working, and then go on about your troubleshoot. Nope. Turn it on, put it on a manuals, or run the zone manually from the timer and put on 10 to 15 minutes. Just give yourself a lot of time to walk around, do a little investigation, and walk the entire property looking for things that might be unusual. Yes, they said it was the left side yard, but they forgot or didn't know that there's a big drip zone attached to it, for some Leland cypresses that was installed years ago between the properties or something. Just look around, just looking for anything. Also listen for water gurgling, and don't be afraid to go and kick over some leaves or whatever, looking for some water that you may be hearing. But just walk around, and while you're out, grab your multimeter off the truck and let's go back to the timer. And we're going to do a quick timer troubleshoot. I've got a separate video just on this topic. Should take you just a couple of minutes. This is one of the easiest things to do. We want to check to make sure our timer is operating properly. It's probably still running from when you put a manual zone on. So let's click it over to AC voltage, and let's just check, make sure it's putting out the voltage we're expecting. Should be around 24 volts. But also, you've got one lead on your common, one lead on the number 3 terminal, but check 1, 2, and 4, 5, 6, whatever. Make sure that the timer isn't sending out signals to multiple terminals. And then, of course, we're going to turn the timer off. We're going to check our resistance on all of our circuits just to make sure everything looks good there. And it may give us some indication if our circuit number 3 is open. Maybe there's a break in the wire. If it's shorted, then maybe it's just the solenoid has gone bad and shorted out internally. But while you're there, always check the wires on the terminal block and just make sure that they're not coming loose. Sometimes just maybe vibration, or somebody who was doing some service before and forgot to tighten up that terminal. But just make sure all your wires and everything are secure and just everything is what it's supposed to be. Because what we're doing here, we're really looking for 3 different things that can be happening in this situation. If one zone is not working, then hopefully we can determine that that valve for that zone is getting water. 3 things can be happening. Either there's not water getting to the valve isn't opening, it's not mechanically operating correctly, or the third thing is that the timer is not sending signal out to turn the valve on. So when we do our troubleshoot at the timer, we're at least partially working through that thing there, is that the timer may be sending out signal, but it may not be arriving at the valve. So what we're going to do is, if the timer's okay, then we're going to go out and figure out which of the valves that we're looking for. Hopefully, if you've used color-coded wires in the timer, you'll see that zone 3, let's say, has an orange wire. We're going to go out, if there's a manifold of valves, look for that orange wire, and hopefully that indicates our valve. If we don't know where the valve is, then we've got a big problem, and we'll talk about it at the end of the video here. But let's say we know where the valve is and we've identified it. The very first thing that we want to do is see if it has a flow control on the top of it. And if it does, like we see here in this picture, try to open it, to turn it counterclockwise. Maybe somebody has closed it off intentionally. Those flow controls, you can generally completely shut the valve off by turning it clockwise and closing it down. So just make sure that it's counterclockwise, it's all the way open. And now, hopefully, as we've gone through here, once we arrive at the valve location, we can hopefully understand that there's water getting to the valve. Now, we want to look, and while we're looking at the valve here, we want to see if it can open up mechanically by using the bleed screw. If it has a bleed screw on the valve, open it up first and see if you hear any water flushing through or rushing through the valve there and going out to the zone. If that happens, then we know it's probably an electrical problem with the wires coming out there, or possibly even the solenoid. But if you can open it and the valve works normally, then it's an electrical problem. But if that valve won't open from the bleed screw, then try the solenoid. You can open a valve up by cracking open the solenoid, turning it counterclockwise. Don't take it all the way off, just slowly undo it until you hear that valve open up. But if it doesn't, then you've either got a problem with the valve or there's no water getting to the valve. At some point when you've opened up the bleed screw, or if you've undone the solenoid a little bit, you'll see some water leaking out, and you should be able to determine that water is actually making it to the valves. And if it's in a manifold and the rest of our valves are working, then you know that water is getting to that valve. But on larger systems, particularly commercial systems, industrial systems, they may have individual valves in a satellite configuration, valves all over the property, but it may have an isolation valve in front of the valve so that you can work on it without having to drain the entire system down. You can shut that ball valve or gate valve down and then work on your solenoid valve there. So if you're working on a commercial property, look for that. But hopefully we've determined by now that water is getting to the valve. Now, if we've opened up our bleed valve or our solenoid, we've determined that it's a mechanical problem or not. But now what we really want to do is determine for sure that we have electricity coming out there. So undo the wires to the solenoid and go back to the timer and turn it on manually and put some voltage on that zone, and come back with your multimeter and check and make sure you're getting at least 17 volts on those wires. It takes 17 volts generally to open up those solenoids. So check and make sure that you've got enough voltage. But also, if you have a station master, which is, I recommend pretty much every technician just, spend whatever little bit of money it costs for these things. It's a great little tool, and it's got batteries in it, and you can hook it to the wires of your solenoid, and then when you turn it on, it'll open the solenoid from there. It puts out, at least 17 volts, and it'll turn it on, so you can determine whether or not it's the solenoid or isolate it to the wires. So this is all just part of our toolkit to figure out which of these things are, because once we're there at the valve, it's either the water getting to the valve, the electricity getting to the valve, or the valve isn't opening. And so if it's not opening, then rebuild or replace. Generally, I always start off and rebuild the valve first, and then if that doesn't do it, replace it, as long as you can determine that's what the problem is. So the final problem that we may have here, because we've solved this problem so far, if we figured out, one, the water is getting to it, the water's passing through it, or the electrical signal is getting to the valve to turn it on. If it's not those, and we've pretty much solved the problem, but what if we don't know where the valve is? Now, we're getting to a stickier part of troubleshooting, and hopefully if you're a technician, you have access to a wire tracker, some kind of electronic device that'll allow you to clamp onto the wire and then track it out into the field and find that. I've got videos on that in my courses and on YouTube and so forth. But if you're a homeowner, I wouldn't suggest going and renting one of these and doing it the first time, because it's something that you need just a little bit of practice with. But I mean, possibly you could, but this is the point I'm going to tell you, to contact a professional and have them come out and track that valve down and find it for you, because that gets a little bit trickier. And even with, us with 20 years experience, sometimes finding a valve. I mean, I'm on a property right now working to where there's just one valve that's completely gone, and somebody must have cut the wires off to it because there's no signal, and it can't be found. So just keep that in mind, that if you can't find the valve, maybe that's the time to call in a professional. And hopefully if you're a professional, you have the tools to be able to find it.